My name is Misan. If you want to remember it, think Nissan with an M, and that will put you right there. I'm going to talk about OSHA, the expectations, what their document contain. I would not dump a bunch of documents on you. I'm just going to do some highlights and point you to certain places where those things exist. From there, I'm going to transition into talking about workplace violence and how do we remedy that and how we prevent it. First and foremost, our lawyers would like us always to put this up. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't even stayed at a Holiday Inn last night. The idea here is that I'm not rendering a legal opinion. I'm just sharing information with everyone here. For legal opinions, please consult your corporate attorney for that. Before I get started, I have something personal I would like to share with you all. Some presenters are really good at it. They're talented. They have the charisma. Some, like me, have to work hard at it. So I practice. This is the second time I give this presentation in the last 24 hours. The first time it was to my wife after dinner yesterday. And she listened to me, delivered the presentation. I felt really good, felt excited. The material is relevant. I thought it was good to be in a manufacturing environment, and I will tell you why in a minute. And I asked her for her opinion. She said, will you go back to the agenda slide? And you're going to do introduction, workplace violence. You're going to talk about OSHA. You're going to talk about prevention, methodology, and then you're going to talk with some detail about the elements, and you're going to talk about self-assessment. I said, yes, with a lot of enthusiasm. And my wife said, how long do you have? I said, 45 minutes. And my wife didn't say anything. There was a momentary pause, and she rolled her eyes. Now, we've been together for 38 years. I know how to respond to anything, but the rolling of the eyes, I just can't respond to it. So it bothered me all night long. I need your help today. If you believe that I covered the agenda in my 45 minutes and did a relatively good job of it, give me a thumb up at the end. I'm going to run to the corner, take a snapshot of the room, and take it to my wife during dinner today. If you think I missed the mark, give me a thumb down. I will go have humble pie for dinner. I've had it before, and I will have it in the future. So, having said all of that, let me tell you a little bit about us. We are crisis managers. We manage crises for clients. We manage crises before they happen, during the event, and after the event. Before the event, we look at risks, vulnerabilities, and from there, we do planning. From the planning, we move on to basically post, and you see, I missed it again, post-event management. So this is what we do. This is our business. This is our only business. We work across from retail, manufacturing, colleges, schools, mining, you name it, but in this specific area. This is my background, 28 years, 29 years in manufacturing. Started my working life as a manufacturing supervisor. Moved on between Motorola, Western Digital, Xerox, Western Digital, Motorola, and AMD. So that's basically my career, all of it in operations. The last 8 years, I've been with Firestorm, and I've been doing business continuity, crisis management, etc. let me get into framing the definition. This is the OSHA definition. When we think of workplace violence, often people think of shooting events, violence event when someone got physically hurt. But that's not all of it. The physical is certainly part of it. Harassment, intimidation, threatening, disruption behavior, threat, verbal abuse, physical assault, and homicide all fit under that umbrella. And manufacturing is obviously a workplace. Schools, colleges are also considered a workplace, so it is pretty comprehensive. If we accept this, then we need to look at some of OSHA's sentences that I picked from their documents, and the references are all next to the quote. Recognized hazard include, recognized hazard is a danger recognized by the employers, industry in general, and by common sense, and this is really important. Common sense can mean a large scope, and this is often used by OSHA. Your responsibility as an employer to keep your workers safe. People are your responsibility. Existing and potential hazard. So you don't necessarily, you're not held responsible to protecting them from existing, but potential hazard. Prevent and control those hazards. So an employer has the obligation to recognize the hazards and then deal with them to protect their workers. Establish a practice and procedure, and then train your employees on every potential hazard, and then the employer is responsible to verify that they understand what you taught them. So there's quite a bit that is required from an employer, and often what we see when we work with employers is that internally they go into sometimes rabbit holes. And the scope, if you read this the way it is written, the scope can be infinite, and so could the consumption of resources. So the idea here is for me to help frame what is needed, what is required, and how can you meet the expectation of OSHA while making sure that you are living within your budget, within your environment, within your culture. 4 types, typically there was 4 types of workplace violence. The criminal intent, those are the folks that will come in to steal a truck, steal tools. We see it in pharma a lot, where people go in to steal pharmaceutical. Customer-client interaction, we see it a lot in retail. Employee, we see it across the board. Domestic, these are situations where a domestic dispute spills into the workplace. Sometimes they end up with homicide, sometimes they are in the parking lot, and sometimes they're inside. The thing about them is that the perpetrator knows somebody comes to work at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever time it is, and they know when they leave, and they know where they park. There is no better area to target someone than that work. So we see domestic quite a bit. Ideological is something that started rearing its head in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe more so now than before. People have different politics, different thinking, and we see it on the news. Somebody wearing a hat, somebody doesn't like it, the altercation, somebody get arrested. We are seeing more and more of this work its way into the workplace. So, what do we do? In most cases, when the discussion goes into workplace violence, the discussion ends up around reaction. If the active shooter showed up, this is what we will do. We're going to spend money and effort on cameras. We're going to put a security guard. We have 3 people here packing, and we are ready for that Alamo moment. Our approach suggests prevention. Having an Alamo moment never ends up well. I don't recall a single time when an Alamo moment ended well. It always ends badly. We recommend, and by the way, Firestorm is highly influenced by Secret Service procedures and protocols. We have quite a few of the retired Secret Service folks within the company. They put together our prevention program. They modeled it around their life experience. So their approach is really simple. If a Secret Service agent had to reach for a weapon, they failed. They considered it an absolute failure. Their job is to prevent anything from happening, so they do a lot of work ahead of time. There are teams that go scout areas, look at site, do analysis, figure out threats, figure out vulnerabilities, and deal with them ahead of time. So that layered approach includes prevention, threat assessment, planning, and training, and those are not singular, those are a package. If we want to be successful at prevention, these need to exist in our environment, in the way our culture deals with preparedness. We do a lot of webinars. We attend a lot of conferences, meetings like this, and we often poll. And I am confident my organization is equipped to handle and respond to violent situations. 47% said yes, and this is quite an improvement. 6 years ago, that number used to be more in the low 30%. So there's quite a bit of improvement here. However, no and I don't know is really tough. More than half don't know, or purely no. Out of the 47%, I have organization workplace violence prevention plan and participated in training exercises. 75% says yes. So 75% of the 47% are pretty good, in a good place. 25% are not. So these are the numbers that we are dealing with. Now, so why aren't we safer? Certainly we're hearing a lot more these days about workplace violence. Yes. So cost is one factor. And I agree. We get called to companies where they will say, we've been at this for a year or a year and a half. We have a dedicated resource or a couple of part-time dedicated resources, and we're not better off today than we were when we started, and we already spent X amount of dollars on this or that. And the response, our response typically, is to look at what they've done, and what we see is single focus on something. Active shooter, we want that Alamo moment. We spend all the resources on that particular element, forgetting that we need to really look at a more comprehensive view of what's going on. Inconvenience, yes, there's some level of inconvenience, and aesthetics also play a role. Nobody wants to walk to an office building surrounded by a moat and barbed wire. It just doesn't work that way. The thing, though, is that there are ways, and you see those in retail, you see those in government building, outside government building, where certain measures can be taken. It could be as simple as a planter to help with a high-speed approach where nobody can crash through the doors, etc. So there are things that can be done relatively inexpensively to remedy. Belief is one that is really difficult. It will never happen here. And a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was at a company, and we were talking about their people. What the culture here? Have you experienced any problems? What can you tell? Oh no, our people are great. They all work here for a long time. They all get along together. They go play games on weekends, softball, etc. Everything is great. And then one guy said, well, didn't Bob have a problem with that pipe thing last year? And somebody asked, oh, yeah, Bob got arrested because he was building a pipe bomb. And, okay, and, okay, oh, Bob, yeah, wasn't he friends with Julie, the girl that cut herself? Oh, yeah, I remember that, etc. And all of a sudden, the belief that everything is okay, all employees are great, we cannot go wrong, is being shattered by the people that just gave us that statement. So belief is something to consider. I was really happy to be within a manufacturing crowd today, simply because I do not feel that I need to explain process. In many engagement, I have to explain to people what a process means and how it works and how it needs to be repeatable and all those happy things that we do in manufacturing. Preparedness is a process. It's not an on-off switch, and we need to deal with it as a process that is subject to improvements, subject for optimization, etc., just like any other process. Our strongest recommendation is to start the process with a hard look at a site. And we suggest that sites are looked at from the perspective of the Secret Service, from the perspective of prevention, as opposed to the perspective of reaction. We work with police officers. We have retired police officers within our company, and their training, their protocols are based on response. Somebody breaks the law, they respond. Somebody attacks somebody, they respond. That's what their training is all about. That's what they do. In this case, we advocate looking at it from where can someone walk in? Do you have visibility? Can you account for people, etc.? So site assessment is important, and it's important to be in the construct of looking at the general environment, topography, geography, traffic pattern, etc., outside the building and inside the building, down to every electrical plug, etc., etc. Once we understand the site assessment, we also define the risk associated with that site. Is it flooding, natural disasters? Is it earthquake if they are the West Coast or Oklahoma, etc.? And what are the vulnerabilities associated with those risks? So if I have a factory in a flood area, but I happen to be 4 feet higher than the rest of the surrounding, flood may not be a vulnerability for me. But flood may be vulnerability to my employees. Matter of fact, tell you a quick story about this logistics delivery company local in Florida. When Hurricane Ike came in the Gulf and swung out toward the east and went through Florida. They're off the coast. They have a metal building. They got all their trucks inside, shuttered the place, and thought, tomorrow, storm will be gone, we'll be back in business. Sure enough, the storm passed, a lot of devastation. Nothing happened short of a couple of trees got knocked over here and there, but everything is ready for them to open the doors. No employee showed up. Their employees lived closer to the coast. Their employees were dealing with their families. They were dealing with lack of power. They were dealing with down vegetation, etc. So the company was fine. There's no vulnerability there. Their vulnerability was their people. So it's really important to distinguish the two, and then plan based on communication, evacuation, shelter, lockdown, lockout, and medical. Now, OSHA talks about evacuation quite a bit They touch on shelter and lockdown and lock out, but they don't necessarily call them out. But it is important to have them in place when we look at an emergency response plan. Think of it as a playbook to respond to an emergency. We advocate a layered approach. Active shooter, walk the path. Walk a path. The idea here is that no one wakes up on Monday morning and says, today I am the active shooter. I'm going to go shoot something or somebody. That doesn't happen. Typically, there is a series of life events that takes place, sometimes as early as elementary school. There are behaviors, there are signs, and it goes all the way until that particular event. I don't recall a single situation in the last 20 years that we studied as a company where someone that's normal, happy, well-adjusted, decided today, right now, I'm going to be an active shooter or I'm going to assault somebody. It just didn't happen. So what we suggest is walk the path. Walk the path in terms of the red flags, the behaviors that over a period of time. We also advocate walk the path. If I am an active shooter walking into a place, what would I do? How do I do it? What we see from incident analysis is, for example, active shooters try to open doors. If the door is locked, they move on. We don't know of a single incident where an active shooter shot someone through a door. One incident, they shot through a glass window in a door because they saw somebody behind that. But so walk the path, assess the threat, and then connect the dots. If it is a behavioral dot, connect those. If it's a risk dot, connect those. Behavior of concern. If you are serious about prevention and you want to build your preparedness around prevention, there are behaviors that people need to understand, recognize when they see, and help a company deal with. These are behaviors that are associated with violence in the workplace. Not every one of them is a red flag. For example, obsession or interest in attacks. As a company, we study every attack that takes place. Doesn't mean I'm going to do anything. Please feel safe. But there are some markers. For example, the kid that shot up Sandy Hook, he was obsessed with Columbine. He kept a spreadsheet that documented what happened in each one of those incidents. That kid did that over a long period of time. So think of it as Johnny go happy. At work, everybody loved him. All of a sudden, there is a departure from norm. Johnny is no longer very happy. Johnny is being by himself, is isolating himself. Maybe Johnny is developing some level of paranoia, etc. That departure of the norm is the behavior of concern that needs to be looked at. There are processes to deal with those, and there are tools to deal with behaviors. They rely heavily on the intake. We need to know that there is a behavior of concern. Otherwise, how on earth can we deal with it? And more importantly, we need to know that there is a behavior of risk associated with it. To give you an example, real life, we monitor social media for some of our clients. One company we monitor, we detected a tweet early in the morning. I hate my job, I hate the company, I really don't like my boss. Minutes later, I'm at work, I can't believe I'm here again. On and on, throughout the day, there was about 42 or 43 tweets. The last one was, they all hate me, they're all conspiring against me, I'm bringing a gun tomorrow to work, and I'm going to show them. If you are that employer, do you want to know that night, or do you want to know in the morning? I suspect you want to know at night. And this is the idea about intake, about knowing what's going on. It can be as high-tech as social media monitoring. It could be as low-tech as a little box that says suggestion box or make it better. Yes, ma'am?
Are you monitoring each employee's social media accounts? How do you get to that?
No, we cannot.
The company?
No. Public social media. Whatever is publicly available, we cannot legally go into a person's account. But what happened is this. Real story. A student, she tweeted, Johnny brought a gun to school again, with a picture of Johnny sitting in a computer lab, honest to goodness, with a gun across his chest. Johnny's very happy. Johnny shared it with his friends privately. We don't see that. But one of his friends tweeted it out to everybody in the world, saying, look, he brought a gun again. Guess what? That was a behavior of risk, and we had to quickly deal with it. But it could be Johnny is more deprived, Johnny is more paranoid, etc. It could be different. So back to the idea of you can be high-tech or you can be low-tech. Make it better box. Suggestion box. Those work fine. If you do that, please make sure that you check it on a regular basis and that you have a process that takes that information, that intelligence, and categorize it. Is it something where I need to call 911? Is it something that I need to call a forensic psychologist? Is it something that's routine? I'll just keep an eye on it. And then decide about whether it's guarded, elevated, severe, or imminent risk, and deal with it accordingly. Those processes are consistent with best practices. Those processes will help prevent a lot of things that otherwise would not be prevented. Critical incident response, testing, simulation, training, those are self-explanatory. I just would like to take a minute to focus on physiology. Built into every human is a natural reaction to danger. Run or fight or freeze. Those are in everybody's brain. The freeze, by the way, is because there were predators that detected motion. So freeze was a good response maybe years and years ago. Today, I'm not sure it is the case, but it is what it is. So we often, when we look at companies' approach to safety, approach to meeting OSHA requirement, we see an approach that was prepared in a conference room or on a desktop under normal circumstances. It doesn't take the physiology aspect. It doesn't take into consideration the fact that when we are under stress, our vision will narrow into a tunnel. We develop selective hearing. We develop high pulse rate. Our physiology changes, and we're unable to do things that otherwise we can do in a normal environment. To give you an example, Sandy Hook. Kids hid in the, not the cafeteria, the library with the librarian. For the librarian to lock the door, she had to open the door, get her key, step into the hallway, insert the key into the hole, turn it, remove it, step back, and close the door. Under normal circumstances, somebody can do it. Under the stress of shooting, no. Motor skills go away. We had an incident where a student in Atlanta told the teacher, I think there's somebody with a gun over there in the playground. The teacher got so scared, she could not dial the 911 number that was the protocol to do. So Often we see plans that are great on paper in an office environment. Put them under stress, put them under simulation, they're not good enough. So we really need to pay attention to that. Critical incident response rely on sensing a danger, evaluating the option, and commit to action. And this is really important. We need to sense. If we don't sense, we won't react. When we sense, we need to evaluate the options. If we have training, if we simulated, then we fall back on our training. In the absence of that, we will fall back on what's programmed in every human brain, and that's a reaction. There is a video, and if anybody wants to see it, I will share the link with you. The attack in Paris, there was an American band playing, 3 guys up on the stage. When the shooting started, the camera is on them. One guy froze, the drummer dove behind the drums and hid, and the singer hot-tailed it out of there. The 3 basic human reactions displayed in response to the one stimulus of shooting. So unless you can fall back on your training, chances are your brain is going to hand you one ticket, and you will execute on it under pressure, and that may not be the optimum way to go. When we sense danger, there is denial. Oh, it can't be. It's firework. I thought it was firework. Never mind, it's not the 4th of July, but it's firework. Oh, it is normal. Jody or Joe is always like this. Social proof. People look for others in the group and emulate their behavior. So we hear a shot, chances are we look at each other, and if some people started running this way, everybody will run this way. Normal reaction. And underestimating severity. Oh, it's okay, it's always like this, all those things happen. These are things that will get in the way of sensing, and we need to learn to get over them. Pre-incident activities, training and testing. Anybody here was in the military at one point or police? We always drill, we always train. There is a reason for that. We fall back on our training. Mental scripting, it is really important to have that. When I walked into this room a couple of hours ago, walked through the door, stood in the corner there, and counted the doors. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I need to exit, I knew where to go. Matter of fact, tell you this story with my wife. Every now and then we go see a movie. So we went in town to one of the theaters where you walk into a narrow walkway, you turn around, the screen is here, and then you have the amphitheater and you walk up and sit down, right? Familiar with those? So we walk up there, we sit down. My wife knows what I do for a living, so I looked, exit up there, too many people there, here it's easier. So she looked at me and she said, well, did you develop a plan? I said, yes. And you mental scripted? She said, yes. Well, tell me, what do you think? I said, well, honey, look, if something happened, I will help you over the rail. It is only 5 feet, and then I will jump, you break my fall, and I will run away. My wife did not talk to me until we got home. So the bottom line is mental scripting can be done, can be fun, can be interesting, particularly in training and in simulation. We always encourage clients to do it. Active shooter response, escape, secure, confront. Escape is clear. Put as much distance between you and an event. We don't say hide, we say secure. Hide is not enough. It may be the only option going under the table, but that's not enough. Secure is put a barrier between you and the event. Lock a door, lock an office door, lock a bathroom door, somewhere. Lock it, be behind it. Or worst case scenario, we don't recommend this, but In a worst case scenario, confront. If you have nothing to lose, confront. But more importantly, alert. We need to let others know something is going on. If I see a gunman in the parking lot and hot-tail it with my car back home, I left the entire group open to that, so we need to do that. When we act, whatever the action is, commitment, confidence, conviction. We do something, we do it with commitment. That can make a lot of difference. These are the elements of preparedness, and they dovetail to what OSHA requires or what OSHA talks about in their documentation. Awareness training, we need to train people how to be aware. If they're not trained, they cannot quite be aware of their surrounding as well as they are. Anonymous reporting is important. High-tech approach, applications, couple of buttons, and someone can report anonymously. The beauty of the new technology is also an employer can reply. For example, I think Joe is planning something. Oh, what do you think Joe is planning? So you can have a two-way conversation anonymously with someone that's giving you a tip. This is really important. People are afraid. People don't want to talk or don't want to be labeled as a rat. Having a solution around anonymous reporting is really important. Social media monitoring, we talked about that. There need to be some level of social media monitoring. It doesn't need to be top shelf where there is computers monitoring 40, 50 social media sites for you, but this is something that can be done simply through a group within the company, or typically we see sales and marketing doing that. They have a lot of internet interaction, etc. experience. We need to be able to centralize information. The Sandusky affair cost Penn State upward of $500 million. This could have been resolved by having an information warehouse where every time a red flag was raised over 20 years about Mr. Sandusky, it was kept so people have all the dots to connect. They did not, and then they denied it, and the rest is history. You can read it in the news. Administrator on duty concept is really important. In every site, in every office building, in every manufacturing site, there need to be someone in charge at all times. It may be the president, it may be the VP, etc., but it need to be, that function need to be in the hand of somebody. When I worked in manufacturing, we worked 24 hours, 3 shifts, first, second, and graveyard. The norm was the senior supervisor for night shift and graveyard is the administrator of duty. But nobody ever shared with me, what do I do? What's my playbook? Who do I call? That wasn't formalized. So the suggestion here is it really needs to be recognized and formalized. Risk categorization matrix, I showed you that before. Is it imminent? Is it routine, etc.? Behavioral assessment team, this is the team that will look at behaviors and decide, hey, what do we do here? Do we send somebody to counseling? Do we seek medical attention or other help? Management systems need to be in place. Whatever we do, we need systems to be in place to manage not only deal with an event, but deal with the aftermath. And then we need to have a scripted response to a violence event. What do we say? What language do we use? Who do we say it to? How do we say it? Can make all the difference. Sometimes a crisis happen, an event happen, and the real crisis is how a company or an individual responded to that crisis. We had a big train that slid backward, burned up a town in Canada. The CEO of that company walked in there and said, it is the train driver problem. They should have secured the train. Well, the investigation is not done, and it's not particularly true, but he got a backlash, and he got beaten up about this. too early to jump, need to watch what we say and how we say it. What do you do next? On our website, you'll find a lot of information. We have a YouTube channel where we have several years worth of webinars about every possible topic under the umbrella of business continuity, preparedness, safety. It is just available for everybody. We do this not because we do it for a living. We do it because we are passionate about it. And we are passionate enough to know that sharing information is the best thing we can do within our community. There is nothing better than sharing information. Of course, if you want us to work for you, we will work for you, but sharing the information for us is a given. Our website also has information. Assessment. I encourage you to have an assessment. For the attendees here, I will extend a self-assessment offer to you at no cost. It will cost you about an hour of your time. It will cost us about 3 hours of our time. And we can give you, we've been doing it since, 2005, 2006. We have a database that dates all the way back. We look at 11 dimensions of preparedness. All of them dovetail with OSHA requirement. And we'll tell you where you stand in respect to your peer group, where you stand in respect to best practices. Yours for the asking, just let me know, and I will arrange it for you. I'm open for questions. So for the question about HR, the more HR policies and procedures are consistent, the better off a company is. If they are consistent on how they hire, how they fire, how they discipline, and they make sure they are not making people feel that Joe is getting a better treatment than Julie. Fairness in application is key. People get the feeling of being disrespected and extrapolate from that everybody is hating them and everybody is after them. Domestic is absolutely, when there is this goes to sensing. Once that relationship soured, HR need to know about it, their management need to know about it, and somehow they need to put some distance.